rejected police dog, kept returning to one container. When they opened it, the world changed forever. The sun was setting over the quiet industrial yard, casting long shadows across the rows of containers. Among the ordinary scene, one unusual detail stood out: a dog. Not just any dog, but a lean, muscular German shepherd with keen eyes and a restlessness that hinted at something deeper. His name was Max, a former police dog trainee, but Max's story wasn't one of accolades or successful missions. It was a story of rejection. He had failed his training program, deemed too unpredictable for the force. Yet, as fate would have it, his rejection was the very reason an extraordinary event was about to unfold. Max had been taken in by a compassionate family after his dismissal, a small mercy for a dog who had spent his early years under rigorous training. Life had slowed down for him, transitioning from police drills to leisurely walks and backyard playtime. But even with his new family's love, there was an unshakable spark in Max, a drive, a purpose, as though he was waiting for his moment to prove himself. That moment began innocently enough. Max's new owner, Sarah, worked at a nearby storage facility and often brought Max along for company. The yard was a labyrinth of identical shipping containers stacked high, their metal walls echoing the sounds of the day. It was here that Max's peculiar behavior first started. On one ordinary afternoon, as Sarah went about her work, Max froze mid-step. His ears perked, nose twitching in the air as if he had caught a scent no one else could detect. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, he bolted toward a specific container. Sarah called after him, but Max was relentless. He barked, scratched at the container's door, and whined as though he were begging for someone to let him in. At first, Sarah thought it was just a random moment of curiosity. Perhaps a rodent or a stray animal had passed by, leaving behind an intriguing scent. But the next day it happened again, and then again. No matter where they started their walk, Max always made his way back to that same container. Days turned into weeks, and Max's obsession only grew. His behavior was so intense that Sarah couldn't ignore it any longer. She decided to investigate. What could possibly be inside that container to draw such a strong reaction? Was it just a dog's curiosity, or was there something more? Little did Sarah know, this was the beginning of an unbelievable journey, one that would uncover a secret so profound it would ripple far beyond the quiet industrial yard. The world as they knew it was about to change, and at the heart of it all was Max, the rejected police dog who refused to give up on what his instincts told him was important. As Sarah approached the container that day, armed with tools to finally open it, she couldn't shake the feeling that Max's instincts were leading her towards something extraordinary. She had no idea just how right she was. Max wasn't an ordinary dog. From the moment he was born, it was clear he was destined for something greater. With his sharp, intelligent eyes and boundless energy, he was the perfect candidate for police training. From the start, the trainers had high hopes for him. He excelled in basic obedience, quickly mastering commands like sit, stay, and heel. His agility was unmatched, and his nose was sharp enough to track even the faintest scent. But despite his physical and mental prowess, Max had one flaw: he was unpredictable. While other dogs followed orders with robotic precision, Max sometimes hesitated. His trainers would later describe him as too independent, a dog who thought for himself instead of blindly obeying commands. In a field where precision and predictability were paramount, Max's independence was seen as a liability, not a strength. The day Max was dismissed from the program was one of confusion and heartbreak. He had come so close to completing his training, yet one too many instances of defiance sealed his fate. For Max, this meant being labeled a failure and sent to a shelter, a stark contrast to the life of honor and purpose he had been bred for. Fortunately, Max's story didn't end there. A kind woman named Sarah, who worked as a manager at a local storage facility, decided to adopt him. Sarah had always loved dogs, especially working breeds, and when she saw Max's bright eyes and hopeful demeanor at the shelter, she knew she couldn't leave him behind. Every dog deserves a second chance, she told herself as she signed the adoption papers. Life with Sarah was different from the regimented world Max had known during his training. Gone were the harsh commands and rigid schedules. Instead, Max found himself in a world of cozy dog beds, belly rubs, and long walks in the park. Sarah often brought him to work at the storage yard, a sprawling expanse of metal shipping containers and concrete paths. Max quickly became a favorite among Sarah's co-workers, who were charmed by his friendly demeanor and concrete paths. Still, something about Max remained restless. Even in his new life of comfort and care, there was a lingering spark in him, as though he was waiting for a moment to prove himself. He hadn't forgotten his training, nor had he forgotten the instincts that had once set him apart. It was during one of these routine days at the storage yard that Max began showing an unusual interest in a specific container. At first, Sarah thought it was a game. Max would wander the yard, sniffing at various objects, but he always returned to one container. He would sit by its door, his tail wagging anxiously, and bark as if calling for someone's attention. No matter how Sarah tried to distract him, Max's obsession with the container grew. It was clear he had sensed something Sarah couldn't yet see. Unbeknownst to her, Max's past, his rejection, and his unyielding determination were all leading to this moment. His instincts had been right all along, and the container he couldn't ignore held a secret that would change everything. The storage yard was a vast, sprawling expanse, a maze of shipping containers stacked high and arranged in neat, endless rows. To anyone else, it might have seemed like an ordinary place, a quiet industrial space where goods came and went without much fanfare. But to Max, the rejected police dog, it was something else entirely. He wasn't just sniffing around aimlessly or chasing scents for fun. He had found something important, and he wasn't about to let it go unnoticed. It all began on a crisp autumn morning. Sarah, Max's owner, had brought him along to the storage yard as she often did. The place was usually calm, with the occasional hum of forklifts or the chatter of workers breaking the silence. Max loved wandering around, his nose twitching at the faintest of scents, his tail wagging as he explored the yard. But that day was different. As Sarah checked inventory on her clipboard, Max froze mid-step, his ears perked up, his head tilted slightly, and his nose pointed directly toward a particular section of containers. He stood there for a moment, completely still, as if something had caught his attention. Then, without warning, he took off, his powerful legs propelling him toward a container near the far edge of the yard. "Max, hey, come back here," Sarah called, but her voice was drowned out by Max's barking. He had reached the container, and his behavior was unlike anything Sarah had seen before. He was pawing at the door, barking insistently, encircling the container as if trying to find a way inside. At first, Sarah laughed it off. "What's gotten into you?" she muttered, walking over to him. She assumed it was something simple, a stray cat maybe, or the scent of leftover food from a previous shipment. But when she tried to pull Max away, he resisted. He planted his paws firmly on the ground, growling softly as he stared at the container. Over the next few days, Max's behavior only grew more peculiar. Every time they visited the yard, he would make a beeline for the same container. He would sniff at the edges, bark at the door, and even whine, his eyes pleading with Sarah as if trying to tell her something. It was an obsession. Sarah began to grow curious herself. She asked the workers about the container, but No one seemed to know much. It had been there for a while, they said, part of an old shipment that had never been claimed. The contents were a mystery, its metal walls sealed tight, and its origin long forgotten. "What could be in there?" Sarah wondered aloud. Max's determination was unlike anything she'd ever seen, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was onto something. Finally, after weeks of watching Max's unwavering focus, Sarah decided it was time to investigate. She gathered a set of tools and asked a coworker for help. The container was locked, its door rusted shut, but Sarah was determined. As Max watched intently, tail wagging in anticipation, Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to uncover whatever secret had captured her dog's unwavering attention. What she was about to find would turn their ordinary day into an extraordinary moment. The container stood like a silent guardian in the corner of the storage yard, its weathered surface bearing the marks of time. Scratches, faded paint, and patches of rust. It had been sitting there for years, unnoticed and unimportant, blending seamlessly into its surroundings. But to Max, the rejected police dog, it was anything but ordinary. His intense focus on the container was undeniable, and Sarah, his owner, could no longer brush it off as a mere curiosity. One chilly morning, Sarah decided she had seen enough of Max's peculiar behavior. He had been obsessing over the container for weeks, his barking and scratching growing more urgent each time they visited the yard. It wasn't just his actions, it was the look in his eyes, a mixture of determination and urgency that seemed to plead with her to do something. "This is crazy," Sarah muttered to herself as she grabbed a crowbar and a flashlight from her car. Max trotted beside her, tail wagging furiously, as if he knew she was finally taking him seriously. She couldn't help but smile at his excitement, though a nagging sense of unease crept into her thoughts. What could possibly be inside that had captured Max's attention so completely? As Sarah stood in front of the container, she ran her hand along its cold metallic surface. The padlock on the door was old and rusted, and it didn't take much effort to snap it open with the crowbar. As the lock fell to the ground with a metallic clink, Max barked loudly, his voice echoing across the yard. "Calm down, Max," Sarah said nervously. She glanced around, half expecting someone to show up and ask what she was doing. The yard was quiet, save for the occasional gust of wind and Max's excited panting. The container door groaned as Sarah pried it open, revealing a dark and musty interior. Dust particles danced in the air as she shone her flashlight inside. At first glance, it appeared to be just another storage container filled with forgotten odds and ends, boxes, old equipment, and a few tarps thrown haphazardly over the contents. But Max wasn't fooled. He darted inside immediately, sniffing furiously and circling a specific spot near the back. Okay, let me see," Sarah said, following him in. She pushed aside a tarp and uncovered a metal box, smaller but sturdier than the rest of the items. It was locked tightly, its surface gleaming faintly under the flashlight beam. Max barked again, pawing at the box with the same urgency he had shown for weeks. Sarah's heart raced as she crouched beside it, her hands trembling slightly as she examined the lock. "What is it, Max? What's in here?" she whispered. The tension in the air was almost tangible as Sarah worked to pry the box open. Each moment felt like an eternity, the sound of her tools echoing in the confined space. Max stood beside her, his eyes never leaving the box, his ears perked, and his body taut with anticipation. As the lid opened fully, Max let out a low, excited whine. Sarah's flashlight illuminated the contents, and her breath caught in her throat. She stared in disbelief, her mind racing to process what she was seeing. The significance of the discovery began to dawn on her, and she realized that Max's instincts had been right all along. The world outside remained quiet, oblivious to the extraordinary moment unfolding inside that unassuming container. But for Sarah and Max, everything was about to change forever. The moment hung in the air, heavy with anticipation. Sarah's hands trembled as she lifted the lid of the mysterious metal box inside the container. The flashlight beam wavered, casting shifting shadows across the confined space. Max stood rigid by her side, his tail wagging furiously, and his ears pricked forward as though he knew this was the moment they had been waiting for. As the lid creaked open, Sarah's breath caught. Inside the box lay something she had never expected. A collection of items meticulously arranged, their significance immediately evident, yet almost unbelievable. The first object she noticed was a bundle of faded documents, their edges yellowed with age. On top of the papers was a small leather-bound notebook with intricate embossing on its cover. Sarah picked it up carefully, the weight of history almost palpable in her hands. Flipping through the pages, she realized it was written in a language she didn't immediately recognize, filled with precise handwritten notes and intricate diagrams. The words felt ancient, almost sacred, as if they held secrets long forgotten by the world. But what stood out most was a symbol repeatedly sketched in the margins. A circle intersected by radiating lines, a design that seemed both familiar and otherworldly. Beneath the notebook lay another item wrapped in cloth. Sarah hesitated for a moment before unwrapping it, revealing a small, ornate artifact. It was a delicate, metallic object, intricately carved with patterns that seemed to shimmer under the flashlight. Though she couldn't identify its purpose, its craftsmanship was extraordinary, far too advanced for something that appeared so old. "Max, what did we just find?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her pounding heart. The dog responded with a low, excited whine, his nose inching closer to the artifact, as if he too could sense its significance. Sarah's mind raced as she sifted through the contents of the box. Alongside the documents and artifact were photographs, black and white images of people standing beside what appeared to be excavation sites. In one photo, a group of scientists posed beside a large unearthed structure adorned with the same symbol from the notebook. The expressions on their faces were a mixture of triumph and apprehension, as though they had uncovered something magnificent yet deeply unsettling. It didn't take long for Sarah to realize that this was no ordinary discovery. The artifact, the documents, and the photographs told a story of an ancient civilization, their advanced knowledge, and perhaps a secret they had tried to hide. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a historical find. It was something that could potentially reshape humanity's understanding of the past. As Sarah pieced together the fragments of the mystery, Max sat calmly beside her, his job seemingly done. He had led her here, guided by instincts she now realized were extraordinary. This dog, rejected for being too independent, had uncovered something that experts might never have found on their own. The air inside the container felt electric, as though the discovery itself held a power that was slowly awakening. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that what they had uncovered was a doorway to something far greater. And as she sat there, staring at the artifact that seemed almost alive under the beam of her flashlight, one thought echoed in her mind. The world will never be the same again. With Max by her side, Sarah knew she had a responsibility to share what they had found. Little did she know, this discovery would spark a chain of events that would ripple across the globe, forever changing the course of history. The discovery inside the container sent Sarah's world into a whirlwind of events she could never have anticipated. As she sat on the cold concrete floor of the storage yard, cradling the ancient artifact and poring over the cryptic documents, she realized she was holding something of immeasurable value. It wasn't just a historical treasure. It was a key to a mystery that could change the way humanity understood its past. The first thing Sarah did was alert a trusted friend who worked in the field of archaeology. Dr. Marcus Bennett was skeptical at first when she described what she had found, but when he arrived at the yard and saw the contents of the metal box, his skepticism melted into awe. He spent hours examining the artifact, the notebook, and the photographs, his excitement growing with each passing moment. This could be one of the most significant discoveries of the century. He muttered almost to himself. Within days, word spread among experts in archaeology, history, and anthropology. The storage yard was soon filled with researchers, each eager to examine the find. The media caught wind of the story, dubbing it the Max discovery in honor of the dog who had led Sarah to the container. News outlets ran headlines like "Rejected Police Dog Uncovers Ancient Mystery" and "Artifact Found in Storage Yard May Rewrite History." The artifact itself became the centerpiece of the discovery. Experts confirmed it was not only ancient, but also crafted with techniques that seemed far too advanced for its time. The documents, once translated, revealed fragments of an extraordinary story, one that hinted at a lost civilization with knowledge of engineering, astronomy, and mathematics far beyond what had been previously thought possible. The photographs, though dated, provided tantalizing clues about the origins of the artifact and its connection to a long-buried site that had been overlooked for decades. Max, once considered a failure, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. His story captured hearts around the world, and people were fascinated by the idea that his instincts had led to such a monumental find. Sarah, too, found herself overwhelmed by the attention. Interviews, invitations to speak at conferences, and offers from museums flooded in. She was no longer just the manager of a storage yard. She was the woman who, alongside her extraordinary dog, had stumbled upon a discovery that could alter the course of human history. But it wasn't just the academic world that was affected. The artifact's implications sparked debates across industries, from historians re-examining ancient timelines to technologists speculating about the advanced methods used to create it. Even philosophers and theologians weighed in, pondering the deeper meaning behind the find. Was it evidence of a forgotten chapter in human history? Or perhaps even contact with something extraterrestrial? For Sarah, the most profound impact wasn't the fame or the academic breakthroughs. It was Max. The dog who had once been labeled as unfit for service had proven his worth in a way no one could have imagined. He had trusted his instincts when no one else had, and in doing so, he had changed the lives of everyone around him. As Sarah watched Max being showered with affection during a ceremony held in his honor, she couldn't help but smile. The world had changed because of him, and in a way, so had she. The once ordinary dog, with an extraordinary sense of purpose, had taught her that sometimes it's the rejected and overlooked who hold the greatest potential to shape the future. The moment was surreal. Sarah stood in the grand hall of a packed auditorium, the artifact displayed on a pedestal behind her, gleaming under the spotlights. Cameras flashed, capturing the historic event, while murmurs of awe rippled through the crowd. But for Sarah, the true focus wasn't the artifact or the applause. It was Max, sitting proudly by her side, his tail gently wagging as if he understood the gravity of the moment. As she stepped up to the microphone, Sarah took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly as she began. "This isn't just a story about an artifact or a discovery," she said, her gaze sweeping across the audience. "This is a story about instinct, perseverance, and the incredible bond between humans and animals. Max, he's the real hero here. The crowd erupted into applause, but Sarah's mind drifted back to the journey that had brought them here. She remembered the first time she saw Max at the shelter, his eyes full of hope despite the label of failure hanging over him. She remembered his relentless determination at the storage yard, his unshakable focus on the container that everyone else had ignored. And she remembered the moment they opened that box together, uncovering a secret so profound it had forever changed their lives. As she continued speaking, her voice cracked with emotion. Max was labeled as unfit, a dog that didn't follow orders. But his independence, his instincts, they were his greatest strengths. He saw what no one else could. He trusted his nose, his heart, and he didn't give up, even when no one else believed in him. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked down at Max, who gazed back at her with unwavering loyalty. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over the audience like a warm embrace. "I've learned so much from Max," Sarah continued, her voice steadier now. "He taught me to trust, to listen, and to never underestimate the power of someone, human or animal, who refuses to be ignored. He reminded me that everyone, no matter how they are judged, has a purpose." The emotion in the room was palpable. Even the stoic scientists and reporters couldn't help but feel moved by the bond between Sarah and Max. For many, the artifact was the story's highlight, but for Sarah, it was this moment, standing beside the dog who had been her partner in every sense of the word. As the ceremony came to a close, Max was presented with a medal, his name etched onto its surface, alongside the words, "Des Memorates," the smile is longer, enough that the crowd lost its patience. They started yelling hate. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as Max wagged his tail furiously, his eyes bright and full of life. For Sarah, the emotional climax wasn't in the accolades or the media attention. It was in knowing that Max, once rejected and overlooked, was finally celebrated for the extraordinary being he was. She knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his sturdy frame, and whispered, "You did it, buddy. You proved them all wrong." In that moment, surrounded by applause and admiration, the bond between Sarah and Max stood as a testament to resilience, trust, and the unbreakable connection between a person and their dog. It was a moment they would both carry forever, a reminder that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from logic or reason, but from following the quiet whispers of instinct and heart. If Max's incredible journey has touched your heart, don't let his story end here. Share this incredible discovery with others and spread the message of hope, resilience, and the power of believing in the overlooked and underestimated. Max proved that sometimes the ones who are deemed failures have the greatest potential to change the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to keep the story of Max alive, and stay tuned for more heartwarming tales that remind us all to trust in the unexpected.